David here with Figboot on Pens, back again with another ink review. Today I'll be looking at a reissue of a series of inks from Noodler's. A number of years ago, Noodler's came out with a series of inks based on Russian authors and poets, and that series has been revived with a few changes. So what I'm going to do today is show you the inks in the series and then focus on one ink in particular, which is Noodler's Tolstoy. Noodler's is run by a gentleman by the name of Nathan Tardif. Nathan takes pride in having Noodler's being the smallest ink company in the world with the largest color selection. There are a wide variety of colors available with varying properties as well. Noodler's is known for creating many limited run inks, which are produced for only a short period of time. And in the case of this Russian series, sometimes they come back. Thanks go out to Luxury Brands, who is the U.S. distributor for Noodler's inks, for providing these inks for review. And to take a closer look at this series, and specifically Tolstoy, let's go over here to camera 2. There are 9 inks in the Russian series, and here are the 9. We have, well, almost all of the 9. Here are the first 3, then we have the next 3, and then 2 more. I am missing one, which is called Akhmatova, which is a slightly darker green than this Pushkin here. Each of the colors in this series are named after a Russian author or a poet, and each of the inks has a number of unique properties, which I'll go over here in a little bit. Now, Noodler's inks are handmade by Nathan Tardif, and you will find that there can be some difference between batches, but some of these inks were actually totally different colors. Chekhov, for example, was more of an orange the first time it was released. This is what the bottle looks like. I'm not sure what this says right up here on top, but over here on the right, it does say Tolstoy in Cyrillic. A quick aside, but some time ago, I actually worked for a catalog company which specialized in Russian merchandise. We had a number of contacts in Moscow that I dealt with. Our main contact was named Sasha, and Sasha could acquire things. We offered lots of old military items and various other knickknacks like balalaikas and ushankas and things like that. But we could also get our hands on some pretty unique items. If you wanted to buy a World War II tank, I could get you one. If you wanted a MiG jet fighter, I could get you one of those as well. I could also get you a Russian military submarine if you were in the market for one of those. So yes, I have worked with the Russians, but there was absolutely no collusion. No collusion at all. I have some interesting stories from my time with that company. I'll have to share a story or two some other time, maybe in a Q&A. Now, when you open a bottle of Noodler's ink for the first time, you really need to be careful. Nathan is infamous for filling up his bottles to the brim, literally. Now, I've used a little bit of this Tolstoy, but this is the Pushkin, which I haven't used much of. And you can see how that is literally almost full to the very brim, almost to the point where it's hard to dip your pen into the ink for the first time without some of the ink spilling over. So be warned, you need to be very cautious when opening a bottle of Noodler's ink. And this is what a swab of the Tolstoy looks like. And here it is in comparison to Mont Blanc's Leo Tolstoy, or something like the Diatramentus Ultramarine. There was Anderson's for a while, had their own ink that was, this was their Robin's Egg. And then this is Califolio Bleu Atlantique. And then here's another one of the Russian series, which is just a slightly darker blue, the Lermontov. Now, this is a couple of swabs on some Tomoe River paper. Now, this is here is a much more hefty application, much more than you would normally put on a page. And then this is kind of standard swab with a Q-tip. You can see that there was quite a bit of bleed through, which is to be expected on the heavier application, but not as desirable on this swab. It is kind of a muted blue here. And here we have the ink. This is Noodler's Tolstoy. This is on some Rhodia 80-gram paper that I'd say that it has some high ghosting and bleed through. Even on this Rhodia paper, you could see that there was quite a bit of bleed through on this swab and even some of the writing. I'd say that the shade is low and also that the sheen is low on here. In regard to pens, the ones that, first of all, I use a Pilot Parallel, a 2.4 millimeter for this writing up here, as well as the passes. And then for the writing sample, I have my very first fountain pen that I ever purchased, which is a Lamy All-Star in fine, which actually kind of really writes more like a medium. It's not a super fine. And then next up, we have a brand new pen from Benu, and this is called the Benu Hexagon F. And it's a little hard to see here, but there's some red sparkles in this hexagon design, and it has an interesting look to it. In a few weeks, you'll be seeing a review of this. And then finally, we have a Pilot Custom Heritage 912, and this one has a music nib. This ink is named after Leo Tolstoy, who is a Russian author, and he's best known for his novels War and Peace and Anna Karenina, which were each written in the late 1800s. After spending most of his life writing about war and Russian aristocrats, he had a spiritual awakening, and he became a fervent Christian pacifist, and that his ideas on nonviolent resistance, which he expressed in his later works, were very influential to folks like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. So for the writing samples, I wanted to use some of his quotes from one of his most acclaimed works, which were War and Peace. So first of all, you hear Jenny walking around the office here, so that's what you hear in the background. And it says that we can only know that we know nothing, and that is the highest degree of human wisdom. And I feel that self-awareness to your own knowledge is very important. In regard to a medium nib, we're going to be taking a look at this Benu. It says, war is not polite recreation, but the vilest thing in life, and we ought to understand that and not play at war. That Prince Andre here, one of the characters in War and Peace, argues that if war was not treated as a game, that there might be fewer conflicts in this world. And then finally, with the 912 and the music nib, said, because of the self-confidence in which he spoke, no one could tell whether what he said was very clever or very stupid. And I think we've all come across people like that in our own lives. I will say that the ink or the flow on this ink is very strong. But for an ink that has a very strong flow, it has an incredibly fast drying time. With the fine nib, you could tell it was pretty much dry in 5 seconds. With the medium nib, it was pretty much dry in just a little bit under 10 seconds. Even with the music nib that lays down a lot of ink, it was really dry after 5 seconds, which is kind of incredible. That this ink is bulletproof, that it is UV and bleach resistant, that it's archival and fade resistant, that it is forgery resistant, which means that it's impervious to lasers and alcohol and solvents. It's waterproof, and it glows under some UV lights. Now, one thing that I did notice is there's a bit of a different consistency to this ink. So, just for example, you can see here that it has just a little bit of a chalky look to it. You can kind of even notice that when I put it here, that you can see how it sticks to there. And I'm thinking that that might be part of the UV aspect of this ink, because I have another Noodler's ink, which is 54th Massachusetts, which is actually one of my favorite inks. I like this ink quite a bit. And this one has all of the same properties as far as being archival and waterproof and things like that, but it does not have the UV aspect. And when you dip that, you can see that even though that it doesn't kind of have that same chalky look to it. So I have a feeling that that is what causes that. So let's set that aside. And I said here that the ink has a rather hazy consistency. And I also said that the flow of this ink is so heavy that it comes close to almost negating the effect of this music nib, because it flows so much that it kind of just makes it look like a really broad nib and kind of wipes out some of those crisp lines. So we have a water test. Since this is waterproof, let's see, or what claims to be waterproof, let's see what it does if I put some water on here. And while this is sitting here for a second, let's look at some chromatography. Now, I found this interesting, that this ink claimed to be waterproof, and when I put it in the water to do the chromatography, sure enough, it barely even moved. That it was basically impervious to water, and you could see that it really didn't move whatsoever. So I took it to the next step, and I dipped the entire chromatography strip into the water to see if that would affect it. And I kept it in here for a good 5 or 10 minutes, and it really didn't affect it that much. So I was very impressed with the waterproof aspects of this ink. Now, once I took the chromatography strip out of the water, I kind of left it to dry, and so it seemed like over time it did kind of fade, but you basically saw that when it was sitting in the water, it was really not doing that much. It was dripping down just a little bit, but for the most part, I am very impressed with the waterproof aspect of this ink. So, let's test our little sample here that's been sitting here for a couple of minutes. And as the chromatography states, that I would venture to say that that is very waterproof ink, and that is proven that that is the case. So, thanks go out again to Luxury Brands for providing this ink for review, and as well as the other inks in the Noodler's Russia series for me to check out. You can find Noodler's ink at virtually every major retailer online. They're one of the most widely available inks. So, until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.